Welcome. It's the first FIH Pro League show of 2022. And joining me today are two big personalities from the world of hockey. Adrian Lock is the long-time head coach to the Spanish women's national team, and he is taking time out of his preparations for his team's debut in the Hockey Pro League. Also joining today's show is the man who knows just about everything that is going on a hockey pitch anywhere in the world at any time. The FIH Director of Sport and Development and former GB and England international, Jon Wyatt. So, hi, Adrian. Hi, Jon.
Hi, Sarah. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. So, in today's show, we're taking a preliminary look at the FIH Hockey Pro League and what hockey fans can expect as the season unfolds. But first, we're just going to have a quick chat about some of the continental qualifiers that have been the focus of our attention this January. If we come to Jon first, Jon, the Africa Cup of Nations saw South Africa win both the men's and the women's title, which obviously gave them automatic qualification to the men's and women's World Cups. But what did you make of the event as a whole? And do you get the feeling that teams are beginning to catch up and close the gap a little bit on South Africa?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's easy to look at the results on paper and both South African teams qualifying, and that was what was expected, and sort of a glance at it would suggest that everything was very straightforward. And but for anyone who watched it or followed the results, it was anything but. And Egypt seemed to have a way of really upsetting the way that South Africa wished to play. And certainly in the men, they really took them close. And it goes down to shootout, can absolutely go either way. So yeah, it'll be a bit of a wake up call for South Africa. I think they had they performed really well in Tokyo, and I don't know, but maybe they went into the African Cup thinking it was a foregone conclusion, which is always a dangerous thing to do. But no, I mean, first of all, biggest thing to say is just fantastic that the event took place, and we're all struggling, and it's very difficult for everyone around the world, and traveling from one country to another changes on a daily basis. And hats off to the African Continental Federation and all the organisers down there. Hats off to the teams and the players and the coaches for going through all the various testing and processes and protocols that we all need to do now. So it was fantastic to see, really both really good competitive tournaments. And as you say, South Africa came out on top, but it was far from straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, I saw some of these scenes afterwards. The Ghana women obviously scored first against South Africa women, which set the people watching alight. And later on, the Ghana men, who I think took the bronze medal, they posted something on social media saying, "Okay, it's bronze, but to us that means the absolute world." And I think it did. Both hosting the event and doing very, very well. Adi, just before we move on from that event, did you have a chance to look at any of the Africa Cup of Nations, or do you have any thoughts on what happened there?
No, I haven't seen. I was following the results, but I didn't get to see the games. But like you say, it's easy to think it as a foregone conclusion that South Africa are going to go through in the men and the women. The fact that there's closer games, I think, is important for world hockey. Yeah. That there's more teams that are getting more and more competitive. I think that's good. It's good for African hockey. It's good for world hockey. So I think that's a good sign of things to come in the future.
Yeah, and sticking with you, Adi, as a coach, the South African men's coach after the match said, yes, great that they'd won, but there was a lot of learnings to be taken from their performance before they got to the World Cup. The timing of the continental qualifying events actually couldn't be better for coaches, could it? Because they've now they've seen their teams in action after, for some of them, an awfully long break, and they've now got time to prepare for those World Cups. So it's going to be a very important next few months, isn't it, for these coaches as they qualify?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, after the Olympics, there's always a bit of a downer after the Olympics, and teams are settling down again, looking into a new short Olympic cycle. So it's a nice time to be competing and to see the team compete rather than just training or just having friendlies. And obviously with the situation with COVID as it is, it's not easy to get those games necessarily. So like you say, I think it'll be really useful for both of those teams from South Africa to have competed, to see a little bit where they're at, and to set out their stall for the next few months leading into the next few months for the Women's World Cup at least. Mm-hmm. And obviously the men have that much longer because they have a year to go till the Men's World Cup. But it's very useful to see where you're at and set clear objectives of where you want to go in the next few months.
Yeah, I mean, South Africa, their teams will be in a similar situation probably to you and Spain until now, in that they will now need to chase some international competition, won't they? I mean, you're moving into the Pro League, which will give you that regular high quality competition. What will the South African coaches be looking to do? You know, will they be looking to play lots of matches within a short geographical area, or will they be looking for some big tours to get some really good experience under their belts?
I think it all depends on the travel restrictions. I think more than anything else, South Africa traditionally has looked at have teams host teams in the January-February window, and a lot of European teams have looked to go to get some warm weather training in that window as well, especially in the north part of Europe where it's a little bit colder and it's not so comfortable for training. But obviously this year that's not something that's going to be so possible. I think when you're not in Pro League with the current travel restrictions, it's really hard to get games. A lot of the teams going into the Tokyo Olympics, especially the women's team, well, the women's teams particularly, look to get games against men's teams to make sure they had the match practice. But then again, talking to some of the coaches at Tokyo, it sometimes changes the way you play because of sometimes of the physical differences. So you actually create habits of ways of playing which then aren't adequate for when you go back to playing women's teams against women's teams. So it's difficult to get a balance, and then you can do inter squad matches, which a lot of the teams do as well, which is more realistic, and it's a question of making those games as competitive as possible. Having the time that they've got between now and the World Cup for the women's team specifically, then they'll be able to work with a bigger group, I'd imagine, if the restrictions are permitted in South Africa, and get the fitness work going towards the World Cup, the fitness plan working towards the World Cup, the technical corrections and technical tactical corrections that they want to do towards the World Cup as well, and then be able to implement them in as many games as they can get, basically.
Yeah, so they'll be calendars out and work out what exactly they can do. Jon, over in Oman, we've obviously got the Women's Asia Cup underway, and it's very, very competitive, it's fair to say, out there at the moment. It's no surprise, I guess, that India, China, Korea and Japan are in the semi-finals. But I mean, even today, I've just seen that Korea have beaten India in the semi-finals, which is perhaps a little bit of a surprise. There does seem to be, though, some very healthy competition over in Asia right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, the four nations who've qualified are probably the four that everyone would have expected to. It definitely seems to be a tournament of two halves, if you like. But again, you know, India performed fantastically, obviously, out in Tokyo. And then, you know, the question would be, is that a slight dip in form, or maybe they're trying a few new players because they were more confident of qualifying? So I don't think you can read too much into it. But on the positive side for the likes of Korea and for Japan, they're clearly, you know, on the up and playing well. So yeah, as Adi said, you know, we're only 4.5-5 months away from the start of the Women's World Cup now. So that will be their focus. And of course, for the Asian nations, they've then got the sort of big summer up here in Europe where they go to the Commonwealth Games and then on to the Asian Games, which is obviously the big qualification event for Paris. So yeah, really important year, and yeah, difficult to read too much into it. You're not sure what sort of training phase they're in, and whether they're in a particularly heavy training period, you know, on the basis that they would be able to perform well enough to qualify for the World Cup. And of course, there's no additional benefit of either, you know, coming first, second, third, or fourth in that event. It's simply a matter of qualifying, and then it goes down to world rankings.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the interest for me really has been looking to see what Korea and China could do, because we haven't seen them for such a long time. I mean, we saw glimpses of what Japan could do at the Tokyo Olympics, but I think Korea are probably the biggest surprise at the moment in what's happening out there. Adi, we're also seeing some big scores in Santiago in Chile at the moment for the Pan Am the Pan Am Cup, which is reaching the semi-final stages. In the women's competition, the USA have been the big hitters. They had a 16-0 win over Trinidad and Tobago, a 20-0 win over Peru, and they also had a pool-defining 3-1 win over Canada. Argentina have been relatively tame in contrast, but then they played Chile and Uruguay, who are slightly higher ranked teams. What are your thoughts on the teams in that competition, particularly USA and Argentina women, and how they're shaping up for the year ahead?
Yeah, I think obviously it's the first time I think or the new coaches coming in. So with Argentina, with Fernando coming in, obviously he's got a couple of 2 or 3 young players in there, and then some of the players that have been there for a long time. So Argentina look kind of steady. Again, they've just got together, haven't been together for very long post Tokyo. So like Jon said before, I think they're starting out on their cycle towards the World Cup. So they're just starting out, but they seem to be pretty solid, as you'd expect. Like you say, because of the games they've played against slightly higher ranking teams, but they haven't had to struggle too much. They score corners, they scored open play goals, so they seem pretty good. And the States obviously I think they had a few games with Anthony in the Pro League last year since he took over. But again, it's his first kind of major tournament competition, as it were. So I think it's an opportunity for them as well to show what they've been able to. I'm sure they've been working on since Anthony's taken over, and to see where they are. And like you've said, they've had 2 very high scoring games, because independently of the level of the opposition, to score that many goals, you need a certain attitude, certain mentality. You need a certain precision to make sure that the ball keeps going in the net. It's easy to dominate games and to fade away and to waste a lot of opportunities, and it ends up being a 10-0 to score 20 goals against any opposition. You need a certain mentality, a certain precision. So I think that bodes well. And then obviously the Canada game was a much bigger test, which looked more even. They had the opportunities and the ball didn't seem to be going in. Then Canada scored first, and it looked like a manic period in the last quarter with various cards, and then the three goals, with the second goal coming, the 2-1 coming with 3 minutes to go. They looked like they've been pushed right to the end. So I think that was good for them as well. And obviously playing against Canada, who've also got a new coach coming in. So, I mean, a lot of these teams that we've been talking about, and the Asian teams as well, have had new coaches coming in. So, I mean, not only is there the post-Tokyo period, maybe some change of players, some younger players coming in, also new coaches coming in and finding the way with the teams that they're taking over.
I mean, it's an exciting time for those teams, isn't it? As you say, the new coaches and everything. Jon, probably we would think that USA and Argentina will take 2 of the qualification spots. There's a 3rd spot. Chile or Canada? I know you can't be a betting man on here, but who would your money be on?
You're absolutely right. I can't be a betting man, and I'm not going to be a predictive man either. So it could go either way, couldn't it? And that's really exciting. That's really good. You know, if the event in Asia was good, but it was kind of, you know, the 4 have qualified who we expected. Again, in South Africa, not as straightforward as expected, but the 2 teams who we expected to qualify, the South African teams, both did. But in actually both the women's and the men's down in Santiago, I mean, it really could go any way. And you know, we saw a fantastic match between Chile and Argentina. So, you know, whilst it's a brilliant result for the US men to beat the Canadian men, which was unexpected, and therefore you think, oh, good, they've avoided Argentina in the semi-final, you know, assuming that the crossovers go the way that you would expect them to go. But then they've got to take on Chile, and you know, Chile are very strong at the moment and really pushed Argentina all the way. So yeah, I think in either the men or the women, you know, you couldn't really predict. You'd obviously assume that Argentina would get through in both, but those next sort of 1 and 2 places are really up for grabs. And you know, looking further afield or looking further ahead to 2028, it's really good that we've got the US teams, you know, becoming competitive, at least at a Pan Am level. And you know, with 6 years to go to the games in Los Angeles, it's great to see. And if we can, you know, if they start moving up the rankings and they start getting more international competition, and you know, then you know, they will be competitive in Los Angeles, which is what we always want. We always want to have both genders, both men and women competing in a host Olympics and being competitive, just like the Japanese were out in Tokyo.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully, like the French will be in Paris as well. You know, the French team's another team that's making its move up, which I think actually is a great time to turn to the Pro League, because obviously France is now going to be taking part in the Pro League and the men's competition. But let's start with Adi. How's your team looking, Adi? Are you all ready for action?
Yeah, looking forward to starting. We're just still working in smaller, reduced groups. A few changes in the team, a few changes in the coaching staff. So a similar situation to other teams we've been talking about. and we start training camps on Sunday, so in a few days' time. So hopefully PCR test will go okay, and we can start with a reasonable group. And obviously starting out with Holland, it's a nice way to start and see where we're at.
Well, we spoke to Georgina Oliver, your captain, the other day, and she said that if she had her way, she'd like to play the Netherlands every single week. Is that a sentiment you share?
Oh, so you get quality games that way, don't you? You're more likely sooner or later you're going to win one as well. But I think it's when you're playing against the best teams in the world, it's good because you're really testing yourself. So I think probably what Gigi was referring to. Obviously, having played in Holland for quite a long time, she's very Dutch in her ways sometimes. That's rubbed off in her, very direct.
I think she's very optimistically expecting you to win those 2 matches, quite easily from the way she responded.
It'll be exciting.
Yeah, it will be really exciting. Jon, can you just tell us about the new teams that are joining the league, and just for people who are sort of perhaps new to the Pro League, just explain a little bit about what's been happening.
In my new role as a director of rearranging schedules, as we all are, in all parts of our life at the moment. But so unfortunately, Australia and New Zealand obviously pulled out halfway through last year, based on their government saying that there was no way they were going to be able to travel. And so AD and the Spanish women have come in, which is great, and the Indian women as well. That was relatively easy because clearly both Spanish and Indian men are already in the Pro League, so that was a relatively straightforward process, and it's great therefore that we got both genders going to be competing in those 2 nations. So that was the easy part. Finding the replacements for the men was harder. Because the way the schedule had worked, we had teams traveling down to Australia and New Zealand in the sort of February period, because that's good from a weather point of view. So and that was European teams and the Indian team were going to be traveling down, playing both Australia and New Zealand in one trip. So from a sort of sustainability and an economic point of view, that made sense. So we needed to find 2 nations to step in who were going to be competitive primarily, but secondly could play matches in February.
Yeah.
And so the solution we came up with was we went down the ranking and we invited the next teams in the ranking. South Africa were able to accept, which was great, and clearly you can host in South Africa in February, so that was good. And then the next team who were able to accept was Canada, but playing hockey in Canada in February is a different kind of hockey. That wasn't really feasible. So we came to the arrangement where Canada were going to play their sort of home matches in South Africa, and that was a great solution. South Africa were really helpful, and Canada were really up for that, and the Dutch, the Germans, and the Indian teams who were going to go down, that worked well for them to go down for 10 days, play 4 matches, and that was all organised. And then, unfortunately, due to the travel guidance coming out of the Canadian government only very recently, since the start of the year, they have sadly had to pull out, and so we had a sort of hectic week last week, literally, where we were trying to speak to the next nations in line to see if at this very last minute anyone would be able to make it down to South Africa in February to play these Pro League matches, and then go to Argentina in April, and then go to Europe for the away matches. We had a really positive response from a number of nations. We made the process very clear to them that dependent on who responded positively, it would be the highest ranked of those nations who were invited who could come. And fantastic news again with Paris only 2.5 years away, that the French men were able to find some time in their calendars and find some financial support from their NOC. So they've stepped in as the sort of late replacement for the late replacements. So we have South Africa and France coming in. France will play their home games in South Africa next month. So they'll play against the Netherlands, against Germany, against India, as South Africa will, and they'll also play against South Africa. So they'll get 8 fantastically high quality matches in next month. Then a little break. Then they'll go to Argentina, which is both South Africa and France will do that, and then they'll play the remaining 6 matches in May and June up in Europe. So yeah, it's brilliant that we've been able to that a nation has been able to step in at the last minute. It means that we can maintain nine nations in both the men's and the women's Pro League, which is really positive. And it's going to be great to see how the French do, because clearly they did very well in the World Cup in 28. They then had a fantastic team in the Junior World Cup in December, and I'm sure a number of those players will be playing. So yeah, good chance for them to test themselves against the best in the world, and another great opportunity to promote hockey in France, where in 2.5 years' time we'll have we'll have the Olympic Games. So.
Yeah, I mean, congratulations to everyone who got that sorted, because it sounds like a logistical nightmare to sort out, but it's there, and that's great. Edie, for teams such as yourself, India, South Africa, and France, aside from regular top flight hockey, what are the other sort of peripheral benefits of taking part in something like the Pro League?
Yeah, I mean, it gives us competitive hockey. That's the main benefit. I mean, during the year, normally, we have the tournaments that we qualify for, which for us is Europeans, World Cup, Olympics. And the rest of the year, we're kind of preparing. We have friendlies, we have training camps, we can play official matches. But they're not competitive matches, and it's a real struggle at the moment to get games. So to be able to really compete, it's not the same when you're playing and learning and preparing the team to really competing with something on the line at the end of the day. And so the fact that we can play for ranking points, we can play in the Pro League, we can try and get the best result we can in the Pro League and compete properly on a regular basis. I think there's no better way of really preparing the team than for the competitions that then come. So really looking forward for that way. Obviously, beginning Olympic cycle, it's a time to give players experience as well. Obviously, there's some players that have got that experience and some younger players coming in. It's the usual thing. And again, to be able to give them competitive hockey and be able to compete in a competition with a prize at the end of the day, again, is not the same as coming in, playing with a team, and then going to a tournament type competition as their first competition. It's not the same. So in terms of preparing the team, it's really good. Plus the fact that we get to travel, we get to play in different countries. We get to travel to places which we probably wouldn't normally travel to. We get to play against teams that we don't get regular hockey against them. Again, which is an incentive, because it helps us develop as a team. It helps us to live different experiences. This year, in terms of our traveling, we'll go to India. Most of our teams never traveled and played hockey in India before. So that'll be a new experience for us, with the passion that I know that the Indians show. We'll see if there's public there and the people there or not. We'll see. But even so, just it's somewhere unique to go and play hockey, which we haven't experienced before. So all these experiences that we can live form part of our career, our time in the national team, and their experiences to cherish.
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to the interview with Gigi, one of the points she came up with is that this is aside from the hockey, this is a great time for a group of friends, because at the end of the day, they build these friendships and these relationships within the squad. To actually be able to travel with your teammates and your friends to places all over the world is something that they haven't had before. And I guess the other thing that it brings in as well is a sense of resilience that perhaps you don't always find. If you're just traveling throughout Europe, you don't have to develop the same level of resilience as when you have long flights and changing in food and changing culture and all that sort of stuff. So there are other bits and pieces that will add to the learning of the whole person, I guess, as well.
Well, exactly. We've been a team where over the years we've tended to be based in Spain and play a lot of our hockey and our competitions in Spain, and then move a little bit into Europe. We haven't traveled. The situation that we've been in, looking back maybe 4, 5, 6 years, we didn't tend to travel outside of Europe ever. It was very just occasionally. And so the experience you gain, like you say, for example, going to Tokyo for the Olympics was one of maybe 3 trips that we've ever made, which is a long distance trips, and all that involves in terms of time changes, different climates, adapting to different situations. Obviously with the COVID, we're adapting constantly anyway, but just different situations. And I think hockey's one aspect of what we do, but like you say, the life experiences that we have together is another. I mean, at the end of the day, with our international program, we're about 120, 130 days a year away from home, living together. So over the years, I mean, I've been on a team for whatever 9 or 10 years. Add those days up.
That's a lot of days.
I've got an analyst to do those kind of things. That's a lot of days. It's years that we're living together at the end of the day. So obviously the human side of things and the friendships and the experiences, the life experience that you live, as well as the hockey, are things that are really important, and that forms part of what we do.
Jon, what's exciting you about the Pro League? What matches are going to really grab your attention? I know you'll be watching every single one of them. What's going to really excite you?
It will really excite me if all the matches happen, Sarah. You know, and who knows if the rules around the world will allow that to happen, but you know, fingers crossed if we do. You know, we just you know, we've kind of skipped over the fact that next week we've got our first ever Pro League matches happening in the UAE, you know, and this is the sort of flexibility, and you know, go back to Eddie's points about resilience that you know, that are being shown at the moment, and people all around the world are just doing everything they possibly can and going the extra mile to get these hockey events and everything else in life, but these, for us, these hockey events going. And you know, a massive thanks and a big hats off to the Asian Hockey Federation, to the Oman Hockey Federation, who've stepped in at the last minute, not only to host the Asian Cup, because it was only in December that it was cancelled. You know, it was not able to happen in Thailand, and therefore, you know, literally at a month's notice, they managed to find a host, and Oman stepped in and hosted and are hosting an Asia Cup. And then 3 days later, because both the Indian and Chinese women are there, you know, we're going to be playing 2 Pro League matches as well. So, you know, that will be an experience, shall we say? And then, you know, and then there's the matches in Spain, which would be great to see. You know, I'm looking forward to seeing all 4 of those new teams coming in. So it'd be great to see how the Spanish women get on. Then we've got this sort of series of 14 matches over a 12-day period down in South Africa. Again, first time we'll have Pro League taking place in Africa, and fantastic for the growth of the sport down in that continent on the back of the successes in Tokyo. Then we move over, and there's some matches over in Argentina, and then we have a very intense period in sort of May, prior to the Women's World Cup, where we've got a huge number of matches going on and all the teams playing against each other in Europe. So yeah, it's going to be a sort of fast and frenetic and busy schedule, as we have tried to reorganize, and we've all tried to reorganize our lives into a sort of ever condensing period. So, you know, from an athlete's point of view, there's domestic competition, there's continental domestic competition with their clubs, there's international competitions, there's, you know, we've managed to find some dates for the reorganized Women's Junior World Cup, so that can happen, because if we didn't have that, then that's another group of young athletes who are going to miss out. So, you know, gone the extra mile, and a big thanks to South Africa and the organizers for doing that at the last minute. So yeah, it's going to be a busy old period. Then we're into Women's World Cup, and then it's the first time we've ever done that in 2 nations, and that's going to be present its own challenges as well. And you know, fantastic opportunity for Adi and his Spanish team to be hosting that, and a great opportunity there. Then we bounce into the Commonwealth Games for the Commonwealth nations. Then it's the Asian Games. You know, then we're into the Nations Cup, and then suddenly, before we think we're going to have a breather at the end of the year, we're getting ready for the Men's World Cup in January, you know, in a year's time. So it's going to be a pretty full-on 12 months, and I'm excited about it all.
As you were outlining all those events, Jon, your eyes were getting bigger and bigger as I think the realization struck that you're going to be so busy.
No, we all are.
This is one of those situations, though, isn't it? You know, a few years ago, people were complaining that you couldn't get hockey for love and money to see, and here we are. We've got international hockey. I mean, I'm looking at my calendar of work just about every single day for I don't know how long. It's fantastic.
Yeah. You know, and you know, Eddie mentioned that you hadn't had a chance to watch any of the matches from the African Cup of Nations. Well, the great news is you can watch them now because they're on Watch Hockey.
Yeah.
And the Women's Asian Cup was on Watch Hockey as well. We've got highlights from the tournament down in Santiago is on Watch Hockey as well. So, you know, we're starting to build up a kind of, if you want to watch international hockey, that's the place to go. And whether that's Pro League, whether that's, you know, these continental championships, whether it's some of the domestic leagues that are now starting to get on there. And yeah, you're right, Sarah. Gone are the days where there's not enough hockey to if you're a hockey fan to watch. There's actually a huge amount going on now, and that will increase and continue throughout the year.
Brilliant. I'm not going to ask either of you to predict the outcome of the Pro League, not at this stage. We'll do that some other time. But just to say, Adi, really, really good luck with your team in the Pro League. I hope you have a fantastic season. Jon, good luck with staying awake for the entirety of the year as you make sure everything's running according to plan. And for everybody else out there, it all starts again. The Pro League starts again on Monday, the 31st of January, as Jon said, in Oman with China versus India. And it just doesn't stop from that moment on. So Thank you very much for watching. Thank you two very much for joining us. Enjoy the hockey for the rest of this Pro League season. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Cheers, Sarah.